Hello, everybody. Here we go, number 252. How cool is that? And we have questions already. Um, hello, Karen. Karen says, "Hi, Eddie. Happy Independence Day to everybody. If I'm working through the apprentice tonalizations or others and have to take a longer break to do laundry or such, that I have trouble reaching the top notes when I return. I've always suspected that that's a, an inflammation thing. And what do I mean by inflammation? The the tissue swells up a little bit, and it does help us to play. This is, you know, um, when we talk about muscular based and inflammation based, I have to be real careful because um, and I have clarified on here before that it doesn't mean that muscular based embouchures don't ever get inflammation. We actually play better when we have inflammation. So I think what happens is you take time off and the swelling goes down and you have to kind of start all over again. Um, Now it's not that you can't get the high notes, it's just it's harder, isn't it? And at the same amount of effort produces less upper register. Does that make sense? Okay. So there's a new icon in the chat. I don't know if you guys can see it. There's crowns, and I have no clue what those are. Everybody has XP, 25 XP. Now, I don't understand what XP is in that context. If it was a game, I would say experience points, right? Oh, now we have Mr. Lampy. Also has. Oh, I see. Maybe it's the top posters. All right. Hello, Larry. Larry says, "Happy Trumpet Independence Day." Although playing duets and in a group setting is good too. Yeah. Hello, Jazz Bray. He says, hey, back at you. David says, "Happy Fourth. Your comment, air before sound, was an eye opener for me. I realized that I was using air stops for notes and articulation." That's correct. That's what happens sometimes. Can you explain more related to music, such as phrasing and dynamics? Okay, so here's the thing. That's that approach. Oh, and he says dynamics and articulation. Okay, that approach to the what I call fire hose air is really just for the practicing, and what it's supposed to do is really it's supposed to awaken in you that um, dependency that the lips have on the air. So I don't want the students when they're playing music to think about that stuff at all. I would rather they um, I would rather that you uh, think only about what the music should sound like and let your subconscious mind generate that whatever way that it comes out. So to me, when we first start doing the air, what you're calling air before sound, for me it would be air above sound, like higher priority, right? Air. I guess priority you could look at the word that way too. there's there's Jeffrey. Hello, Jeffrey. Um, So yes, that concept is really just for the routines, and you work on the routine, being conscientious of that priority, that sequence of priorities, and over time, it makes its way into your performance. It's not something that you can force to happen now. You know, I know there's a lot of people that disagree with me on that point. Um, when there's people that teach this mindfulness in music, right? And that's the kind of stuff that they're saying be mindful about. And I'm sorry, I've had some really tremendous performances in my career. I've had some amazing performances, and every single one of them, every single one of them, have been so mindless that afterwards I can barely remember what I was doing. In fact, isn't that one of the things that they say about mindful, being mindful? Um, they talk about coming home after work, and you get home, you pull up into the driveway, and you'd have no memory of your drive home. And they say, "Oh, terrible, terrible thing," because that meant you were asleep the whole way. That meant you were asleep, according to them. That meant you were asleep the whole way, and anything could have happened. That's what the mindfulness people say. It's not true. Your If what I'm saying is true about the power of your subconscious mind, you're safer driving home when you don't remember the trip home than you are when you're being quote unquote mindful, because you cannot. I'm sorry. If someone pulls out in front of you, you cannot think fast enough to do something about that. And I told you I've had a lot of amazing performances in my lifetime. Some of them have been performances of that nature where I don't know how in the world I didn't end up dead in a ditch. I have no clue. Someone pulled out in front of me. The car, back when I used to have a pickup truck, the pickup truck, you slam on the brakes, the road is wet, and you start going, bzzz, you spin around, right? How do you come out of that in busy traffic without hitting a single person? And I've had that before. That wasn't my conscious mind. That was my subconscious mind. And if I had been more mindful when that happened, I would have probably hit a car. I hope that makes sense what I'm saying. So no, I like for the music practice to be on the mindless side so that we're not striving to do anything. There are a few exceptions, especially in the jazz stuff. For example, um, I have what I call improv exercises. And an improv exercise, so usually with improv, we don't want to try to think about anything. We just go. But an improv exercise is when you make yourself think about something on purpose. You actually try to do something. Now, I want to make it clear that's not how we play jazz. What we strive for when we're improvising in public is to have a totally mindless performance where everything comes out correctly without any effort. But to get to there are series of exercises that we can do where we are mindful. Oh, I don't like that word, but we are trying to do something without improvisation. All right. Well, once again, I'm tired from dialysis. Um, I apologize in advance for all the yawning. um, Kevin says, I see them, but I don't know if I have one. This is a crown test. I don't see. Yeah, I don't see one either for you. I think it might be who's posting the most because it was Karen because she was first, and then David posted 3 times, and now he's at first. So maybe it's some way to encourage people to post more. If that is what it is, I encourage you to ignore that. We don't need that kind of manipulation in our Q and A. I wonder if there's a way. Oh, it does say over in the corner, top fans. Wow. I wonder if I can turn that off. We don't need that. Anyway, Jeffrey says, hola, hola. I got to hear this morning a conversation in that Philippines language. The nurses at the dialysis center are all Filipino, and so they have conversations amongst each other, almost like Spanish. Okay, Larry asks, wait, David said, okay, I got it. That makes sense. Okay, cool. Larry asks, please briefly demonstrate air exercise number 1. I don't know which one is air exercise number 1. Let me pull it up real quick. Um, all right, I'm halfway there. Okay, I'm almost there. Air, the foundation. Woohoo! I haven't looked at this book in so long. Okay, 2.3.1. That's the one that I do now. You don't really need all the rest of them. And you know what? The physical trumpet book is sort of the physical trumpet book is sort of biographical, right? So these other air exercises besides number 1 are the ones I was doing when I first started all of this. Ha! By the way, when you do the air exercise that has paper on the wall, that's not a post-it. That's not a post-it. That's a piece of free floating paper. Anyway, let me demonstrate air exercise number 1. We're gonna do it with left hand because my embouchure is off to the left. I only started doing that in the last 6 months because I also only started holding the mouthpiece. Now that wasn't 6 months ago, but holding the mouthpiece in my left hand for the mouthpiece buzz because of that angle that I do. Okay, my trumpet angle is all the way off this way. So yes, I started doing all this with the left hand. It didn't used to be. So you take your breath. It should be a no stress breath. Okay, no, don't do nothing like that. A very natural breath. Okay, so you take your breath. Now the reason why I have stuck to this for so long is you can open or close the fist. Opening the fist lets more air out. Closing the fist keeps more air back. If I close the fist all the way, it takes too long. I don't like it. And it doesn't feel anything like the air flowing through the horn. If I open too much, that's now there are people. You know what? I had a revelation, and I sorry to take a tangent here. I had a revelation. You guys have heard me talk about where people talk about tension in the throat, body tension in the throat. And I finally saw a video that explained that in a way I understood. And it's not. I would never, ever, ever use the term body tension in the throat or tension in the throat or anything tension throat together. Nope. No, I would never, ever, ever use that term to describe what's going on there. We actually have in this book, my my we were if you've got the physical trumpet pyramid, chapter 2.2 is titled the laryngeal valve. I've been teaching about this laryngeal valve thing. Hey everybody. I've been teaching about this laryngeal valve closing since I did all this stuff because I discovered that that's what happens when the air is compromised. You cut the air off in your throat. This is not throat tension. This is not tension in the throat. This is a automatic response. This is an automatic response to our fears. What happens when you're afraid? You close the laryngeal valve. Now, what kind of fear am I talking about if we're just doing exercises? The fear you're not going to get that note. If you hear yourself grunting like that while you're playing, your laryngeal valve is closing. What we talked about last week about blowing the air, the fire hose air, putting air first priority on the exercises. The part of the reason why we do that is because this natural tendency to cut off the air here. We cut it off for high notes. We cut it off for articulation. We cut it off for playing soft. And none of that should be done. Anyway, let me get back to what we're talking about. But anyway, this is new to me. I actually commented on the video. I said I would have never thought that that's what people were talking about when they were talking about tension in the throat. I would have never thought that. Um, anyway, so we're talking about the air exercise, right? So we want enough resistance that we can hold it maybe, I don't know, 15 seconds, and then take another natural breath and do it again. Take a natural breath, do it again. 3 times like that. Watch. I'm going to do it for reals this time. I won't stop myself. So that's the exercise. Very natural breath in between. Not a slow breath. I don't want to say slow because if after you exhale, it's just a natural in and then a natural back out again, and then back out. Okay, it doesn't have to be slow. Sean says, I was getting ready to ask if you had thoughts while improvising. Of course, we have thoughts. You can't turn your mind off. What should you be thinking about? Should you be thinking about what you're improvising? No, not in a public improvisation. And I'm going to say half of your improv at home, half of it should be a mock performance. Half of your improv at home should be a mock performance. The other half should be improv exercises. When you do the mock performance, you don't care what comes out. When you do the mock performance, and I think this is important too. We have to grow our ability to accept what comes out, whether you like it or not. And you're not going to grow that ability on stage. None of us perform often enough that we will naturally just get used to what comes out of our horn. You know, I had to do this with my videos. For the first year and a half, maybe 2 years, I hated to hear my voice on the videos. I hated it. And I had to make myself get used to it. I had to sit there and when I'm editing the videos, I had to sit and just let that that dislike pass. Let it pass. She's back. She's back. Woohoo! Oh, don't push any keys. We don't want. Anyway, all right. So yes and no. We think when we're trying to make something happen. Um, Now it is okay to have overall thoughts. Like I've had thoughts before where I told myself because I had to have a long, long solo. The leader of the band says nobody takes less than a 10-minute solo. This was with Carlos Garnett. Carlos Garnett, look him up. I miss him. He passed away not long ago. Carlos Garnett, here's another tangent. Carlos Garnett used to play with Miles Davis. In fact, he recorded with Miles Davis. He recorded with Freddie Hubbard. He was a New York. He's actually originally from Panama. And when you see pictures of him, he's got the dreadlocks and all that stuff. Um, uh, I was in a band with him for, I guess, about 2 years. And it was nice. He introduced me one time. It was probably one of our very last performances before he moved back to Panama. He introduced me as the most virtuosic jazz trumpet player he ever worked with. And he's worked with a bunch of trumpet players, Miles Davis included, Freddie Hubbard included. Now, I don't know if he was just trying to be nice or if there's something in my playing that I can't hear because I appreciate the compliment, but I don't know what he's talking about. So I don't think I'm as virtuosic as either Miles or and you know it's funny because Miles always said he wasn't ever going to be as good as Dizzy Gillespie, right? So yes, I was playing in a band with it was called the Latin Jazz Tit. It was Latin jazz with Carlos Garnett, and Carlos told us beforehand nothing shorter than a 10-minute solo, and I took that to heart. But in order to get a 10-minute solo that didn't bore everybody to tears, I had to think about the overall structure of the solo. And I'll tell you what happened. One of my solos on that gig was over 15 minutes long. And when I was done, usually when someone plays a long solo like that, there's no structure. They're just like note barfing, right? They're just note barfing. And um, people don't normally clap very much. They're like, oh, wait, is he finished? When I was done with that 15-minute solo, the whole audience gave me a standing ovation. I don't talk about this kind of thing very often, but we're talking about right now, what we're talking about is that the what you can think about, what you can't think about when you're improvising. So you can think bigger thoughts. You can think to yourself, let me really give them the 1-2 punch, right? I don't box. Not sure where that came from. Or you can say to yourself, let's um, tease them. You can think thoughts like that. Don't be thinking about what notes, what rhythms, what motifs, what none of that stuff that we talk about in the lesson should be thought about in the improvisation. All right, Jeffrey says the phrase the phrase mindfulness doesn't really explain the point they're trying to get across. I always suspected that, right? I always suspected, but here's the thing. This is what my suspicion has always been. That the people who teach mindfulness somehow got it wrong. And that the original mindful people teach something that they don't teach. That's my suspicion all along. I always click through on this stuff, whether it's musical or non musical. I always click through. I want to know what they're talking about in case I'm correct. And in my assumption, my suspicion that the people who teach this stuff are not teaching what was originally called mindfulness. But so far, everybody I've looked into teaches being more aware of your surroundings and your behavior. Um, yeah, anyway, so, oh, Larry says from daily routines. Oh, so daily routines has air exercise number one. Well, it should be the same as what I just did, okay? I apologize. I just assumed, because I just assumed there was only one exercise in daily routines, one air exercise. Karen says the neighbors are off to the hospital. Oh, to have their baby. Woohoo! We are on dog and chicken duty. Oh, you know how much I would love to have a chicken coop. We've looked into it here in Houston, and you have to have 100 feet in either direction from the other house, and I don't think we have that much space. So now it's not illegal to have chickens. And by the way, there are people in my neighborhood that have the chickens without the coop. I think that's a little bit too. I tell people I grew up hillbilly, but that was when I was growing up. I'm, I'm a little too hillbilly to have uh, free roaming chickens in the middle of Houston. Sometimes when I go to the when my band does school concerts, there's a school on the east side that I park in the roadways, and I've seen in one yard chickens, goats, and pigs in city limits, and a yard that's not much bigger than mine. So, well, I hope you enjoy your dog and chicken sitting. Uh, be here now makes more sense. Yeah, I would think so. Except for we're in the performance stuff. In the performance stuff, sometimes it's better to be somewhere else. You know what? Even sight reading. I guess the theme today is mindfulness, right? Even sight reading. The best sight reading gigs I ever did. I used to play with. I think it was called the Houston Pops Orchestra. Nothing, no relationship to the Houston Symphony. Um, the Houston Pops Orchestra, and all we did was we did one kind of song. Here in Houston, we call it New York Society music. New York Society music. It's two beat swing from right. Um, and we play that kind of music. Usually, there's another band. We play that kind of music with that band as people are walking into the venue, and sometimes even longer if they're going to have dinner to our music. But that's all we did. There was nothing else. And we did the same songs in the same order. We would start at the beginning of the book, play the first page, flip the page, play the second page, flip the page, third page, flip the page, fourth page, and it went on like that. The longest one that I did like that was 3 hours long. There are no breaks. Um, for those of you who know anything about now, I don't know what it's called outside of Houston. We just call it New York City, New York Society Band. In a New York Society Band, when you do it correctly, the song never ends. It's the same tempo all the way through. Now we do have key changes and different rhythms and stuff like that, but the tempo is the same all the way through. The groove is the same all the way through. It's that two beat stuff all the way. And the sight reading. I'm not even a good sight reader. When I say that, people they they're surprised, right? I'm good enough to make a living. Okay. When I say I'm not a very good sight reader, I'm comparing it to my other skills. And sight reading is not my best skill. Okay. But even when I'm sight reading, I sight read better when I'm in the zone and practically brain dead, so to speak. You know, they teach us in school that whole mindfulness stuff about sight reading. You got to know what the key changes are. You got to look ahead and find the the sign, find the coda, read the roadmap. There's none of that in a gig where you just turn page, turn page, turn page, turn page. There's none of that. You don't get to look ahead. And sure enough, after the second, third, fourth song, there's no more mistakes because I'm in that zone now. And I found myself on that gig thinking about so many things. Well, I'm supposed to be sight reading, and I'm not making any mistakes. But what's going on in my mind is the last argument I had with my ex. Not so. Don't get me wrong. I that band stopped working before the divorce. Okay, so I'm not giving the impression that I was thinking about the last argument with my ex 10 years later. I'm not saying that. I'm not like that. So so yes, I was thinking about the arguments. I was thinking about what I'm going to eat when I get home. Because back in those days, I went to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. And a lot of times I would be hungry at 2. So I'd be thinking about what kind of sandwich I would want, or if I want to, you know, eat leftovers. I would think thoughts like that, making it worse. I would think thoughts like that. I've had other sight reading gigs where one of the musicians made me angry, and I would just sit there in the gig stewing the whole time over what the guy said. All of this, I'm not thinking anything about the sight reading. So it's the same thing with sight reading as it is with improvisation. So yes, getting back to what Jeffrey says, it's okay to be someplace else when you're performing. It's okay. Let me be clear about this because sometimes I'm not clear about it enough. I am not anti thinking. There is a time when you should be aware of what's coming out of the bell, and that's when you learn something new. Like if you're learning a new skill, This is why we use the expansion studies to learn a new skill. Every time you add a new note, please be mindful. How about what that note's fingerings are? Okay, please be mindful about that. If you're learning a new rhythm, please be mindful about that. Because it doesn't get into the subconscious without it being mindful first. I hope that makes sense. The only passageway to the subconscious is through the conscious mind. I'm speaking specifically about music here. And let me clarify exactly what I'm saying here, because you can play mindlessly and it will go into your subconscious, but it will be riddled with mistakes. So when I say be mindful that that's the only passageway to the subconscious mind, I'm talking about playing correctly, right? You can do it mindlessly, but you won't play correctly if you're not paying attention to what's coming out of your mouth. If you're not paying attention, all of this stuff, even the first time you do a lip buzz, you have to be mindful. The first time you do mouthpiece buzz, first time you do the breathing exercise, you have to be mindful so that you're doing it correctly. So I never want to give the impression that we're just mindless all the time. But the objective is mindlessness. Every musician's objective, always, every musician's objective, always, the final objective, should be mindless performance. And I strongly believe that you cannot have mindless performance without mindless practice time. And somehow I understood this intrinsically. In the 80s when I was first going through. In fact, I think what the story I'm about to tell you goes back before. I don't know. Yeah, I remember reading Louis Armstrong's autobiography, and someone told me, well, if you want a true uh, documentation of Louis Armstrong's life, there's inaccuracies in his book. Oh my. Of course, there's inaccuracies. We all forget stuff. We all have fake memories. Every single one of us. Anyway, so yeah, let me move on. David says, cutting off the air. That's what I was doing. Yes, with the laryngeal valve. Okay. The best lesson I ever had dealing with that was with, oh, I forget the guy's name. It was the lesson I took when I was living in Chicago, and he gave me all this Chickwitz stuff. Chickwitz's office was across the hall from his office, and and he told me that part of the Chicago school is that playing loud when you're a beginner, and he meant beginner as in not orchestral ready yet. Maybe he didn't use that word, but I would put it that way, right? Playing loud means that the mechanics are correct. The louder you play, the more correct your mechanics are. So he says you learn how to play loud first. Then, over a period of time, you back that off. Wonderful lesson. Wonderful lesson. That was the main thing that he taught me. You play loud, not so that you can get the Chicago sound. No, you play loud so the mechanics work properly. You can't play loud like that and close the laryngeal valve. Does that make sense? You know, back in those days, I knew about the laryngeal valve all the way back in the early '80s, long before I made all my changes. We didn't call it the laryngeal valve back then. We called it the glottis, and it's just not grammatically appropriate to call it the glottis because when the laryngeal valve is in a V shape, and when it closes, it does this, right? It's not like this. It's not like a door that like sliding glass door. It doesn't do that. It's more like this. The glottis is the hole between the two valve things. When you open your laryngeal valve, that hole inside is the glottis. And the terminology in the '80s was don't close your glottis. Well, that's technically not correct because once the laryngeal valve is closed, there is no glottis. So I used to use the terminology glottis, 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 don't close the glottis. I used to talk about that all the time until I realized that the glottis isn't a thing. It's the absence of a thing, right? So I changed my language to talk about the laryngeal valve. And you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, that's one of the drawbacks of lessons online, right? Because I don't know that I can hear a glottis closing, a laryngeal valve closing. I don't know that I could hear the grunting if we have a lesson. Um, so does that make sense? I don't know that I could hear it. I don't remember ever hearing. Actually, yes, I do remember. It must have been loud. But there have been some students, now that I'm thinking about it, there have been some students that I heard the grunting. Let me see, where are we? Sean says, I've heard the grunting while I play. Okay, that's what that is. And a lot of times, now let me talk about the daily routines that I publish, right? Doesn't matter which one it is. One of the benefits of the daily routines is that the valve starts just opening up. You don't have to. What the guys who teach this throat tension, they do these other non-musical exercises, like taking a toilet roll. After the toilet paper is done, take a toilet roll, put it over in your mouth, and they try to get you to feel what it feels like to not have the laryngeal valve close. This is how I figured out. It was that exercise that showed me what it was there. And I understand the exercise. I just don't think it's nearly as effective as the daily routines, as the physical trumpet pyramid. Part of the benefit of doing the routines the way we do them is that you don't have the laryngeal valve closed like that. If you make, if you do those exercises in that order and make air the top priority, there is no laryngeal valve going to kick in. It won't happen. You know what I think is interesting? The same people teaching mindfulness in the trumpet community are also the ones teaching no body tension. They're the same people. Boy, I really don't agree with them at all. You know, I've always wanted to continue my lessons. I took lessons for so many years and I miss it. I miss it. But I'm not going to find somebody like that. If there was somebody local, I won't travel for that. But if there was somebody local that didn't teach that crap, I would actually go take lessons. But I'm not. How do you know? And you can't offend them by bringing it up. Jeffrey says my first drum teacher wanted to know what I was thinking about when I performed the lesson. That's funny. Oh, right. Yeah, we should. I'm serious. I don't think. I don't think we should be thinking about anything. Gary says, I find when I sit on the edge of my chair, I sight read better. Sometimes I tell myself to focus. Um, yeah, I do. I play better. You know what the problem is for me sitting on the edge of the chair? And I do sit on the edge of the chair, but I have a huge overbite. My horn points down. And if I sit normally on the edge of the chair, I can't get up over the trombones. So, and I've showed you guys this before. I sit at the edge of the chair with my back straight, but my back is still straight. But if I lean back like this, I can get my belt up over the trombones. You see what I'm doing? So for me, you know, jumping through hurdles, that's what that's called. Right? Anyway, um, Kevin says, Mr. Lewis, have you ever heard of anyone straining their laryngeal valve? I'm not worried about it happening, but curious if it could ever be an issue. Yes, I think so. I have a vague memory of someone actually doing damage to their laryngeal valve by playing too loud. This would not have been any time recently. This would have been in the early 80s that I heard this. Um, and you can imagine, right? If you're playing marching band loud, if you're playing with marching band loud and you haven't, now this is going to sound like it's contradicting what I said about the laryngeal valve closing when you play loud. Um, but imagine that's how you play. Okay, I better not say that. You know, let me just leave it there, right? On the one hand, I say that if you play loud enough that your laryngeal valve closes. But isn't it possible? Well, I'm gonna have to work my way through this, and I won't do that now. But I do have a vague memory of someone doing that. Now, I'll also say this. Um, no, I won't say that. So when we do growling the proper way, I can't growl properly. It it tickles my throat so badly I can't do it right. So when I growl, I'm flutter tonguing. So you can hear the difference. And I spent so many hours trying to growl normally, right? The growl like a real growl. I can't do it. So when I'm growling, I'm just flutter tonguing. A real growl is I think the laryngeal valve. You close it and it vibrates. I think that's what that is. It's something in your throat. I can do it for about 2 seconds, and then I'm like coughing and uh, I have like a coughing fit afterwards. All right. Sean says doing the daily routine with fire hose air. I think some in the trumpet community teaching mindfulness and meditation to relieve stress, etc., etc. That could be. So, are you asking me, Sean, to explain what I mean by fire hose air? Gary says, is laryngeal valve closing sort of like overstop tonguing in classical repertoire? Um, oh, I see what you're saying. Is closing it bad a bad thing in all styles? Yes, it's a bad thing in all styles. Oh boy, it's a bad thing in all styles. All right, I just now looked at the clock for the first time since we started. We're almost done. I hope you guys have a great 4th of July, Independence Day. I've started calling it Independence Day because I don't know, people. I just want to be more clear in my talking. That's all. Hello, Nathan. Nathan says, "What books do you recommend for a first-year, 60-year-old student? Thanks for your live chats, etc. They have kept me going in my uphill journey to play the trumpet." What books do you recommend? You know what I would start with is a beginner band method, like the old style beginner band methods, like ones that I used when I was in school in the 70s. Because of the songs in the book. The songs in the book. You want to get as many songs as possible. And the beginner band methods had easy to play songs. And, I've gone back to those songs and I will be publishing them in my own method book eventually, along with the exercises that I teach and stuff like that for the beginners. But yeah, so I've gone back to those old uh, nursery rhymes, and I don't even care how old the students are. I used to be self-conscious about that. The reason why we use nursery rhymes and folk songs in the beginner lessons is because they're easy to hear. And we want that. We want the student to hear what they play. Even at that stage, we want them to hear and play what they hear. But you can't do that with an etude that you've never heard before. Now, over time, you learn, and that's why I do write etudes for my students, the beginner students, right? Um, Over time, by doing those exercises and those etudes, they learn how to hear what's on the page. But before that happens, you have to have the um, the song in your head. I see Jeffrey just posted Cotton Eye Joe. Did I tell you guys that that's one of the songs I teach? I think that's the third song I teach. Not the second part, just the first part. Because it's one note off from Mary Had a Little Lamb. Ba 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 da 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 dee da dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da. So that's one of the beginner songs I teach. So yes, I would look now. If you're asking about books that I've written, I'm not sure how beneficial my books would be for an absolute beginner that hasn't played my stuff yet. What am I saying? That hasn't been in a lesson with me. That's the thing. We want to, the stuff that I have, and most of my beginner stuff is not published. Most of it is not published. I've got books and books and books worth of material just for the beginners. And I just need to uh, get to that point where I'm ready to put it all in one package. So, Sean asked, doing routine with fire hose air, you do not have problem with laryngeal valve. That's the idea. The idea is to play loud enough that the fear goes away. That laryngeal valve is closing, later out of habit, but originally out of fear. Fear of the notes, fear of all of that, right? The fear of failure. So the reason why we do the fire hose air, partly, it's not the only reason, but part of the reason is to make the mechanics work properly, just like that teacher told me when I was living in Chicago. Sean says, are the jazz etudes and the jazz improv training the same thing? No. I don't know what you mean by jazz improv training. So what do you mean by improv training? So every exercise that I assign is part of your really training your ear. So the jazz etudes are supposed to replace your transcriptions. Now, some students do get ahead and do transcriptions without. Um, but see, why do I write etudes instead of transcriptions? Because all of the transcriptions I could ever find, um, all the transcriptions I could ever find with those tunes were always too hard. I don't want that for my students yet. Okay. Sean says, you said you had some training for jazz improv. I'm talking about the. No, I don't remember what I was saying. I'm not going to say that. So the training, I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking at that moment. All right, guys, I gotta let you go. Um, got stuff to do. So as always, thank you, Gary. It's great to see you guys. Um, the theme for this one was mindless or mindful, right? All right. Well, God bless you. Have a great weekend. Enjoy your 4th of July, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.